Scary telling.
I remember the day the young girl next door took her own life. It was a sunny afternoon, and I was sitting in my room, lost in my own thoughts while I looked over to her bedroom window. That's when I saw her. The young girl, who couldn't have been more than 15 years old, was staring out of her window with a curious look on her face. I didn't know her very well, but I had seen her around the neighborhood with her parents. They always seemed like a happy family, and I couldn't imagine what could be wrong. As I waved to her, she tilted her head as if she was wondering what I was doing. That's when I noticed the rope around her neck and her body slowly swinging in the breeze. I felt a lump in my throat and immediately ran outside to her house. I banged on the door, but no one answered. That's when I realized that her parents weren't home. I felt helpless, and I didn't know what to do. I ran back to my house and called the police. I could hear the sirens getting closer and closer, but it felt like an eternity before they arrived. When the police finally got there, they found the young girl's body outside her bedroom window. I couldn't believe it. The once happy and full of life girl was now lifeless, hanging from a rope. The whole neighborhood was in shock. No one could understand why she would do such a thing. As the police began their investigation, I couldn't shake the image of her body slowly swinging in the breeze. It was a sight that would haunt me for a long time to come. I felt a deep sadness for her parents who would have to deal with the tragedy for the rest of their lives. As the day turned to night, the neighborhood grew quiet, and the reality of the tragedy began to sink in. I couldn't sleep, and I didn't know how to process what had just happened. It felt like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. In the coming days, the young girl's death was the talk of the neighborhood. People wondered what could have driven her to such a desperate act. Some speculated that she must have been struggling with depression or anxiety, while others wondered if there was more to the story. For me, the memory of the young girl's death was etched into my mind forever. I couldn't help but wonder what I could have done to prevent it, or if there was anything anyone could have done. It was a tragedy that would stay with me for the rest of my life. The days following the young girl's suicide were a blur. I couldn't shake the memory of her lifeless body swinging outside her window. I felt guilty, wondering if there was anything I could have done to prevent her death. I was also haunted by the questions surrounding her suicide, wondering what could have driven her to take her own life. It was a few days after her death that I started to notice strange occurrences in my own home. Doors that I had locked before going to bed would be open in the morning, and I could hear footsteps in the hallway at night when no one was there. At first, I tried to rationalize these events, thinking that I must have been forgetful or that it was simply my imagination. But the incidents continued, and I knew that there had to be something more to it. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a creaking noise from outside my bedroom door. My heart raced as I peeked outside, but there was no one there. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I tried to calm myself down, thinking that it was just the wind or some other natural occurrence. But the events continued to escalate. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find my closet door open or my dresser drawers pulled out. I even started to feel like someone was watching me, even when I was alone in my own home. The unease and fear were constant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started to ask my neighbors if they had experienced anything similar, but no one else had. They looked at me with concern and pity, thinking that I was still traumatized by the young girl's death. But I knew that there was more to it than that. I knew that there was something in my home that was causing these events. I started to research the history of my home and the surrounding area, hoping to find some explanation for the strange occurrences. That's when I stumbled upon some old newspaper articles that talked about a young girl who had died in a tragic accident in the area over a century ago. The article mentioned that she had fallen from a window, and some speculated that she had been pushed. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The description of the girl's death was eerily similar to the young girl who had just taken her own life next door. I started to wonder if there was some connection between the two events. That's why I decided to take action. I called in some paranormal investigators to help me uncover the truth about the strange occurrences in my home. They set up cameras and audio equipment, hoping to capture some evidence of the supernatural presence that I was convinced was haunting me. What they found was both terrifying and intriguing. The audio recordings captured strange noises and whispers, while the video footage showed objects moving on their own. It was clear that there was something in my home that was not of this world. But despite the evidence, I couldn't help but wonder if the presence was connected to the young girl's suicide next door. The haunting seemed to intensify whenever I thought about her or looked at her house. I knew that I had to confront the ghostly presence head-on if I wanted to find any peace. As the haunting in my home continued to escalate, I knew that I couldn't ignore it any longer. I decided to confront the ghostly presence head-on, hoping to communicate with it and find some answers. I set up a meeting with a psychic medium who helped me prepare for the encounter. She gave me instructions on how to communicate with the spirit and what to do if things got out of hand. I was nervous but determined to get some answers. That night, I sat in my living room, alone, and called out to the spirit. At first, there was silence, but then I heard a faint whisper. It was the voice of a young girl, and it sent chills down my spine. I asked her questions, hoping to get some answers about why she was haunting me. She told me that she was the same young girl who had died in the area over a century ago, and that she had never found peace. She said that she was angry and that she blamed me for not being able to save her. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I wasn't responsible for her death, but she wouldn't listen. She continued to whisper angrily, and I could feel her presence growing stronger in the room. That's when things started to get out of hand. Objects began to move on their own, and the air grew colder. I could hear the sound of footsteps coming closer and closer, but I couldn't see anything. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. Just as things were about to get out of hand, the psychic medium burst into the room. She had sensed that things were getting dangerous and had come to help me. She managed to calm the spirit down and get her to leave my home. But the encounter had left me shaken and afraid. I knew that I couldn't just ignore the ghostly presence in my home, but I also knew that I couldn't handle it on my own. I needed help. That's when I contacted a local priest who specialized in exorcisms. He came to my home and performed a ritual to banish the spirit. It was a terrifying experience, but it worked. The spirit was gone, and the haunting had stopped. But the encounter had left me scarred. I couldn't shake the feeling that the young girl's spirit was still out there somewhere, and that she was still angry. I knew that I needed to do more to help her find peace. After the exorcism, I thought that the haunting was over. But it wasn't long before I realized that the ghostly presence was still with me. The unease and fear returned, and I could feel the spirit's anger growing stronger. It started with small things, like doors opening and closing on their own, and footsteps in the hallway. But soon, the haunting escalated. Objects would fly across the room, and I could feel the presence of the young girl's spirit in every corner of my home. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I contacted the priest who had performed the exorcism, but he was reluctant to come back. He told me that he had done all that he could, and that it was up to me to find a way to put the spirit to rest. I was on my own. I tried to research different ways to banish ghosts and find peace for their spirits. I talked to psychics and mediums, and even visited a shaman who specialized in cleansing homes of negative energy. But nothing seemed to work. The haunting continued to escalate, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't sleep, and I was constantly on edge. I started to isolate myself, afraid that the ghostly presence would harm anyone who came too close. It was then that I realized that the haunting was tied to the young girl's suicide next door. The ghostly presence grew stronger whenever I looked at her house or thought about her death. I knew that I needed to find a way to help her find peace if I ever wanted the haunting to stop. I started to research her family history, hoping to find some clues about her life and what could have driven her to take her own life. That's when I discovered that her parents had been involved in a terrible accident a few years prior, which had left them both disabled. The young girl had been their caregiver, and the pressure of taking care of her parents while also dealing with her own problems had become too much to bear. I knew then what I had to do. I contacted the young girl's parents and offered to help take care of them. It was the least that I could do to honor the young girl's memory and help her find peace. At first, they were hesitant to accept my help, but eventually, they agreed. I started to visit them regularly, helping with meals and cleaning the house. I even started to take them on outings and trips, hoping to give them some joy in their lives. And slowly but surely, the haunting began to fade. The ghostly presence grew weaker, and I could feel the young girl's spirit starting to find peace. It was a long and difficult journey, but I knew that it was worth it. In the end, I realized that the young girl's spirit had been trapped in this world because she had unfinished business. She had needed someone to care for her parents, someone to show them the love and kindness that she had wanted to give them. And by doing so, I had helped her find the peace that she had been seeking. The haunting had finally stopped, and the young girl's spirit had found peace. But the experience had left me changed forever. I couldn't forget the terror and fear that I had felt, or the sense of responsibility that I had carried for the young girl's death. I continued to visit her parents, helping them in any way that I could. They had become like family to me, and I felt a deep sense of love and gratitude towards them. They had lost their daughter, but they had gained a friend. As time passed, the memory of the haunting began to fade. The neighborhood returned to its normal routine, and people stopped talking about the tragedy next door. But for me, the memory remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of compassion. I knew that I had been lucky to survive the haunting, and that others might not be so fortunate. I started to volunteer at a local crisis center, helping people who were struggling with depression or thoughts of suicide. I knew that I couldn't change the past, but I could make a difference in the present. And as I worked with those who were struggling, I felt the young girl's spirit with me, guiding me and reminding me of the importance of helping others. Her memory had become a part of me, a constant reminder of the power of love and compassion. In the end, the experience had taught me a valuable lesson. Life is fragile, and we never know what someone else might be going through. But by showing kindness and compassion, we can make a difference in someone's life. And in doing so, we can honor the memory of those who have passed and help